this is Andrew here with Tower Electric Bikes, and today I'm going to show you how to replace the brake pads on your Beach Bum V2 or Beach Babe Tower e-bike. In front of me I have a Beach Babe, and we're going to be replacing the back brake pads on this one here. So some supplies you will need. You will need a 5mm Allen key, and depending on the brake, you may need either a 3mm Allen key or some needle nose pliers. Sort of depends on which run of bike you have. Our factory switched it up on us, and some will have cotter pins, some will have a 3mm retaining bolt. It's the same process either way, it's just a different step to removing them. They both function just about the same, so no difference there. So the one I have in front of me happens to be a cotter pin, which in my opinion is a little more work than the retaining bolt. But if you do have the retaining bolt, you would need a 3mm Allen key to unscrew it. And then of course you will also need some fresh brake pads. These particular ones use the A10.11 by Tektro. We do stock them on the website, but as well Tektro sells them in various mediums, or maybe you'll find it at your local bike shop. It's a very, very common brake pad. There are also a few different brake pad models that will fit on this as well, basically just different brake pad materials. I generally recommend against using organic brake pads on e-bikes. While they may be a little bit quieter, at higher speeds they can tend to heat up and they can crystallize a little bit, and then they don't grip quite as well. Where semi-metallic ones like these are, they're a little bit louder, but you have pretty reliable grip all the way around. So how we start here is we have and this is going to be the same front or back. The brake is mounted to a bracket, which then mounts it to the frame. So what we're going to do is we're going to unmount the bracket from the frame. And the reason we do that is we could unmount it via the bolts that mount the caliper to the bracket, but doing that we would potentially have to readjust the brakes. You may have to end up readjusting the brakes here anyways, but there's a chance you may not have to. So obviously less work is always nicer. So we're going to start by removing these two bolts using your 5mm Allen key. Oh, it is on there stiff. There we go. And just set the bolts down to the side, as you will need them later. Alright, so now that the bracket bolts have been removed, we can slide the whole caliper off. Now the brake pads on this bike realistically have a bit of life left on them. They're pretty hardy right now, but I'm going to replace them for the sake of the video here. So like I said, this is the cotter pin design. If you have if you have the retaining bolt, basically just stick your 3mm Allen key in here, loosen it up, and then set it to the side. For the cotter pin, what we're going to do is you'll see there's one end bent up here, so you're going to take those needle nose pliers and you're just going to bend this straight. You may have to move it sort of small section by small section. You know, as it bends you can get a little more grip and a little more grip. And obviously you want this to be as straight as possible because we're going to slide it right out. So, and there we are, just slid right out. Obviously set that to the side as we will reuse it. So once you have that cotter pin or retaining bolt out, you just go on the top here and you can see the brake pads and their brake shoe, and you just push down on it and you can see the brake pads sliding out here on the other end. Now occasionally, depending how the brake is adjusted, you may have this inner brake sort of butt up against the bracket, but just kind of push it inwards just to get it over that lip. And there we have it. The whole thing came right out. Now these brake pads are a little scored, a little glazed over. Realistically, you could probably resurface these and they'll be good to go. If you are curious about resurfacing the brake pads, be sure to check out our video. We do go into detail on that in there. But in this video, I'm just going to be replacing these bad boys. So if your brake pads are worn, you know, you'd just be throwing these away. And you should always remember, you know, just as a side note, you should always be aware of your brake pad wear. It's you know, I've been in the e-bike repair business for quite a while, and it's something a lot of people forget, is they don't pay attention to their brake pads until all of a sudden one day they're just like, man, my brakes are making this horrible noise. What happens is, you know, e-bikes, they travel very fast, they're very heavy, so they tend to eat through brake pads a lot faster than on a regular bicycle. So, you know, whatever brake pad life you're used to, disc brake pad life you're used to on a regular bicycle, it's usually about half on an e-bike, especially so in the rear. You know, and if it gets down to this plate here, then you're really in for bad news. You probably need a new rotor. So just pay attention to the brake pad wear. You can see here, you can see that life. This one honestly has a lot of life left on it, so I'll probably save these, resurface them, and use them on another bike. So you're gonna get your new brake pads out here, and then we're basically gonna do exactly what we did, but in reverse. So you have your brake shoe here, and you just want to slide the pad in one side and then slide the pad in the other, obviously with the brake pad material facing inwards. Just give them a close, give them a pinch, and then just slip them right back into that slot. Now occasionally what can happen is, if you see this piston, it has a big hole in the center. Occasionally what can happen is that inner pad top can slip inside there and make it a little difficult to slide across, but you know, it's kind of got to finesse with it a little bit. And as you see, it slots in pretty easily once you get past that, and just push them in, make sure they're in all the way. You should see them poking out of the top here. So once the brake pads are in, just grab the cotter pin and your needle nose again, just slide that cotter pin through till it pokes out of the other side, and then you're going to take your needle nose pliers and just bend this back. And it doesn't have to be a really drastic bend. I mean, obviously it's not, you know, I just bend it a little bit, it's not sliding through at all there, so that would be good enough for us, and it'll make it a little bit easier when I go to replace the brake pads in the future, because I have a little more grip there. So once you have the brake pads and the cotter pin in there, just slot this right back over the rotor, and then bolt this bracket back onto the frame. And again, because we did this bracket, we don't have to worry about readjusting anything right now, because this bracket just threads straight on here. All right, so with there, your brake pads are freshly installed. Now, depending on how worn your brake pads are, you may have to readjust the brake. So like right now, I do have a little bit of rub, so I would need to readjust these brakes. I'm not going to go into too much detail on adjusting your brakes. I cover that in another video, and if you are curious, you know, I would definitely recommend checking that one out. Basically, the short of it is you just loosen these two bolts, not take them out, just loosen enough so this has a little bit of play. And then it's more tedious work than anything, but you just kind of have to get it lined up so it's not rubbing on either side. Now, one other thing to keep in mind, if you have really worn your brake pads down quite a lot, there's a chance that the pistons maybe kind of push out of their slot a little bit. So you saw that little silver kind of hollow piston end inside there. If you see that sort of protruding out when you go to install the new brake pads, you're gonna have to press those back in. They do make piston presses that are specific jobs for it that basically look like a flat spade, and you just kind of wedge it in and push them in. Obviously, though, that's a specific tool you may not have or want to buy, in which case you can usually use a flathead screwdriver just to push those in. You know, nothing really special, just press them right into their slots as far as you can. And that is all you need to know to install fresh brake pads on your tower bike. Thanks for joining. Side note that I forgot to mention previously, when you do install fresh brake pads, there is a process you have to go while riding your e-bike, and it's called bedding in your pads. So basically, fresh brake pads, fresh from the factory, will have a factory coating on them, just kind of prevent contamination while, you know, in transit, getting sold, and then making it way to your bike. Now what can happen though, if you don't bed in your pads, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, I got fresh brake pads, time to jam, and they go as fast as they can and they slam on their brakes. That's the last thing you want to do, because what can happen is when you slam on your brakes like that before you've bedded them in, is that factory coating will then transfer onto the rotor. So then what you'll have is slick surface on slick surface. And as you ride and try to brake, those slick surfaces will just kind of rub up against each other and they'll make a lot of noise, and more importantly, they won't brake as well. So to bed in the brakes, it's very, very easy. You just do it while you're regularly riding. For the first few rides after you install the new brake pads, as you go to a stop, don't just white knuckle it, just feather the brake, just tap, tap, tap. The bike will slow down just fine. And over time, and literally on the first ride, you will notice that it starts to bite more and more and more, until finally it feels like a regular brake, in which case you can go back to, you know, slamming on the brakes as hard as you want. Now, obviously, if you're riding and it's in a safety situation and you need to slam on your brakes, slam on your brakes. You know, glazing over your pads is not as important as protecting your life. So if it's a life or death thing, obviously slam on your brakes, but if you're just regular cruising, just feather those brakes until you feel it bite more and more, and you should be good to go.